Today we are diving into one of the longest, most brutal, and deadliest sieges in all of modern history, the Siege of Leningrad. It was a defining moment of World War II's Eastern Front. For 872 days, an entire city was literally condemned to die. So let's get into how it happened and how, against all odds, it was survived.
To really understand this siege, you've got to start right here, with the intent behind it. And nothing, I mean nothing, makes that clearer than this chilling quote from Adolf Hitler himself. This wasn't a typical military plan to just capture a city. No, this was an extermination plan, designed to erase its people from the face of the earth through starvation. 870 days. Just let that number sink in. That's how long the city held out. We're talking nearly 2.5 years. Can you even imagine living under constant shelling and the daily gnawing threat of starvation for that long? And the human cost of those 872 days? It's just staggering. Even the most conservative estimates put the death toll at 1.5 million people, soldiers and civilians. It was a place where death became a normal, everyday part of life.
So, you have to ask, why Leningrad? Why was this particular city such a critical target? Why was Hitler so absolutely obsessed with its total and complete destruction? Well, Leningrad, which used to be St. Petersburg, wasn't just any city. It was like 3 critical targets rolled into one. First, you've got the symbolic angle. It was the cradle of the Bolshevik Revolution. Militarily, it was a huge deal, the main base for the entire Soviet Baltic fleet. And on top of that, industrially, it was an absolute powerhouse, churning out over 1/10 of the entire country's output. Taking Leningrad meant striking a symbolic, military, and economic knockout blow all at once. And look, this directive from the German High Command leaves no room for doubt about the ultimate goal. The plan was never occupation, it was annihilation. The words are right there in black and white: wipe Leningrad from the face of the earth. The strategy was horrifically simple: surround the city, choke off all the food, and just let winter and hunger do their dirty work.
But the people of Leningrad refused to be passive victims. In his incredible show of sheer will, over 1 million citizens, and we're talking mostly women and children here, were mobilized. They dug 700 kilometers of anti-tank ditches, building these massive fortifications with their bare hands to create a defensive line that would genuinely shock the German army.
Despite that heroic, almost superhuman effort, the professional German war machine just kept coming. So let's take a look at how they methodically sealed the city off from the world.
The encirclement happened shockingly fast. As you can see here, it kicks off in August 1941. German Army Group North is pushing hard from the south. At the same time, you've got Finnish forces coming down from the north, though they stop at their old border. But the trap snaps shut on September 8th. That's the day German forces capture the key town of Schlüsselburg, right on the shore of Lake Ladoga. And with that one move, the last land route in or out was severed. The city was completely, utterly trapped. With that ring of steel locked tight, the 872 days of hell truly began for the nearly 3 million people stuck inside. What follows is a story of suffering that's almost impossible to comprehend, but also a story of incredible resilience.
During that first absolutely brutal winter of the siege, this was the daily ration of bread for a civilian: 125 grams. Now, to put that in perspective, that's about the weight of a small apple. And that was all. That was all the food you could count on for an entire day. And to call that tiny piece bread is being generous. To stretch out what little flour they had, it was mixed with pretty much anything they could find: sawdust, cottonseed cakes, even wallpaper paste. This so-called bread was what kept people alive, sure, but it also just ravaged their bodies from the inside.
The city had one single lifeline: a dangerous ice road across the frozen Lake Ladoga. When winter hit, trucks would race across the ice, trying to bring in tiny amounts of supplies and get the starving out. They called it the Road of Life, but honestly, it was often a road of death. It was under constant German artillery fire, and trucks were constantly breaking through the ice, sinking with their precious cargo into the frozen water below.
The starvation reached depths that are just hard for us to even wrap our heads around. It pushed some people past the brink of what it means to be human. This nursery rhyme, which was adapted from an old folk song, speaks to the darkest horror of the siege: cannibalism. It was a real, documented horror. The NKVD, the Soviet secret police, arrested over 2,000 people for it, which just shows the absolute desperation.
And yet, even in that absolute darkness, the human spirit found ways to endure, to defy. In one of the most incredible acts of resistance you'll ever hear about, on the very day that Hitler had planned to hold a victory banquet in the city, Leningrad's starving musicians gathered to perform Dmitri Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, and they broadcast it. They broadcast this powerful, defiant music from loudspeakers all across the ruins and pointed them straight at the German lines. Just an unbelievable act of cultural resistance.
Now, this incredible resilience on the home front was matched by a relentless military effort on the outside to finally relieve the city. So let's walk through how the blockade was eventually broken.
The relief of Leningrad really happened in two main stages. First, you get a crack in the siege. In January 1943, an operation codenamed Iskra, which means spark, managed to punch through and open a very narrow land corridor. It was just enough to get more supplies through. But the final break, that took another full year. In January 1944, a massive Soviet offensive completely shattered the German lines, pushing them back and lifting the siege for good.
On January 27, 1944, after 872 days, the siege was finally over. But the city and its people would carry the scars forever.
To really grasp the scale of the loss here, just look at this comparison. The death toll in this one single siege was more than 6 times the total number of American military deaths in the entire Second World War. A single city suffered a loss of life that's almost beyond comprehension.
And the destruction, it went so far beyond just human life. Take a look at these numbers. Industrially, 840 factories were just gone. Culturally, priceless imperial palaces were looted and demolished. And for the people who survived, over 3,000 residential buildings were burned down or destroyed. The city was left in absolute ruin.
All of this leaves us with a profound and, frankly, a very troubling question. When you consider the explicit orders to deny surrender, to accept zero responsibility for the population, and, as Hitler himself said, to let the city die of starvation, was this simply a military siege, an act of war, or was it something else? Was it, as many historians now argue, a racially motivated starvation policy, in other words, an act of genocide? That is the lasting shadow of Leningrad.